one interesting point, Mike, is, as you know, we got a chance to go out and visit with the Denver Broncos on Wednesday. We talked to the Seahawks yesterday, and normally that takes place a little bit later. And to get a chance to watch the teams prepare on important work days during the week was very interesting in their approach. And Denver was in full pads. They were outside in the elements, throwing in the cold and the wind, and it was a very intense workout on Wednesday. And then yesterday, we were in Seattle, or we were out at the Giants practice facility where Seattle was practicing indoors, and they were pretty loose. They had music going throughout the practice, a lot of high fives, a lot of guys laughing and having a good time. And for a team with no playoff experience, no Super Bowl experience, on that roster, we'll see what happens on Sunday, but they were certainly loose on yesterday. So two very different approaches watching them prepare for this big game.
When you readied for your game in California, where you're one of two quarterbacks who has led his team to 50-point performances, you had one against the Bills in an MVP performance. How'd you find your team that week going up to the game? Supremely confident, very loose? How was your team?
We were a pretty confident team. We had a great week of practice, probably our best week that we had ever had. And I think that that's kind of the norm, because when you get into the Super Bowl preparation, teams are confident. They feel good about themselves because they, of course, have had great years, and here they are playing in the ultimate game. So I don't think any team really ever comes into the Super Bowl with a lack of confidence. We certainly did not. Jimmy Johnson actually anticipated that there would be a lot of turnovers in that game. There was. That's what opened up the game and allowed us to score the number of points that we did. And, there was a time where this game, it wasn't much of one, and that has changed. And in recent years, it's been a lot of great finishes. And I would really be surprised, Mike, just looking at this game. I'd be shocked if it's not a really tight game to the wire. And a lot of people have asked me throughout the week who I like, and I really don't have a team that I like over the other one. I thought going into the NFC Championship game, as we talked about last week, the NFC teams were better than the AFC participants, but I just think that right now Denver is playing with a great deal of confidence, and that matchup against this defense is going to be fun to watch.
Ironically, the only team that has scored 40 in the last 20 years of the Super Bowl was a defensive team that won in a rout, and that was Tampa. I mean, other than that, we haven't had that many high-scoring games, considering how much scoring has become so prevalent and so dramatic during the season. The Super Bowl games have been, low 30s, high 20s, games like that for the winner. We haven't had these huge shootouts in the Super Bowl.
No, and it's a good point. And in the Tampa game that you talk about against Oakland, a lot of turnovers, of course, in that game, too, which opened up the scoring, much like it did in the game that I was a part of, back in the 92 season. So it's hard to imagine. I mean, as good as Denver has been, it's hard to imagine them going out and just putting up 40 points against this defense. I mean, they're awfully good. And I think as much as has been said about that matchup, I really tend to believe that the offense for Seattle and the defense for Denver is likely going to be what decides this game. I think Russell Wilson is going to have to play better than we've seen from him in recent weeks. Offensively, they're going to have to do more. That was not a very good offensive performance by them in that NFC Championship game. A lot of mistakes in the fourth quarter. They can't afford to do that. They've got to play much better, really, than they have in the postseason and then towards the end of the regular season.
Talking with Troy Aikman, of course, who joins us each and every week, and we'll be doing the Super Bowl with Joe Buck on Fox this week. Troy, when you look at these two teams, there's a couple things that just are very basic to this game. Nobody's touched Manning at all. They haven't laid a glove on him. I mean, he hasn't had his uniform dirtied. He hasn't been hit the ground in 2 weeks. Can Seattle get there without having to rush, 6 and 7 guys? Can they get to the quarterback? That would be question number one. What do you think about the Seattle pass rush against that Denver offensive line?
Well, I think that's certainly going to be a real key for Seattle. I mean, typically they are able to get after the quarterback. They had 44 sacks during the regular season. Certainly, as we know, they're a different pass rushing team in Seattle than they are on the road. But they play everybody. They keep these guys fresh. I think Michael Bennett is an outstanding player. He's a matchup problem for anyone that he goes up against. I think Cliff Averill is another one of those guys. Chris Clemens. They have the type of guys that can certainly get pressure on Peyton Manning, and that's going to be a focus, as it is every week for Denver. In order to protect him, he's not going to extend plays. He's not going to create things, certainly with his legs. I think one of the things that's certainly worth noting is that Denver, as we know, they like the no-huddle offense. how much does that impact Seattle's ability to substitute those pass rushers? Because, as I said, they like to play a lot of different guys and keep them fresh throughout the 4 quarters. And if they're not able to substitute, that will have an impact, especially as drives materialize and you start putting plays together. Those guys are not then as effective.
Listen, anything you know that's inside, you're going to keep inside. We understand that. So, I mean, anything you might learn, you owe that to the teams and your broadcast. But in this game, you know, one of the things that's very elementary is they're going to try and pound Marshawn Lynch. And Bill Parcells made the point this week. This reminded him a little bit of Super Bowl 25, where their theory was we need to keep the ball away from the Bills. That's the important thing. The Bills in that game, you know, got knocked, but they scored 19 points in 19 minutes. It was that they never had the ball. The ball was almost 41 minutes for the Giants. Can they pound Marshawn Lynch to the point where we're saying, boy, they can't get Peyton Manning the ball? Can you see that kind of running game from Seattle?
I don't know that I'll see it early. You know, I mean, I think the running game, and we've seen this from Seattle, you know, through the playoffs, that early on it's hard to run the ball. Teams are pretty jacked up defensively, especially when you're playing a team like Seattle and Marshawn Lynch. You know what they're going to do. They're not hiding anything of what their intent is when they come into the game. But in the second half, a lot of those runs then start to open up and you wear a team down. And, you know, 2 things have to happen. Their defense has to, of course, play well, which I anticipate that they will. Seattle's will. And if they got to keep the game close, which then allows Seattle to do the things that they want to do, and that is continue to pound the ball. But Denver, as we spoke about last week, Denver's run defense has been pretty good throughout the year, and they've been really good here in the postseason. Did a nice job in the AFC Championship game against LeGarrette Blount, and you know, so they're confident that they can hold up too. But I think one of the real keys in being able to run the ball and also be able to stop the run is what happens then on third down. You know, I mean, if Seattle is doing a good job on third down, then you get to run Marshawn more, and then you get to keep the ball away from Peyton Manning. But, you know, third downs are typically passing downs, and those become a real key then for Seattle in being able to convert that so they can keep him over on the sideline.